Hey there, Kipsters. Mr. Piazza here. We're looking at objectives 1P.1 through 2, simplifying and rewriting fractions. Although this is only 2 objectives, there's a lot of skills in these 2 days of learning, and this is stuff that you've seen before, but if this is something that you haven't mastered before, it's definitely going to take some practice. So we're going to start with the very first thing you see here, which is simplifying fractions. I'm going to give you a couple examples, some that we'll be able to simplify into a fraction, some that will simplify into a whole number. This first example says 16/24. So just to make it a little easier to look at, I write that because that's the way my computer makes it easy for me, but that's 16/24. I can simplify this fraction because I know that there's numbers that will go into 16 and 24. And so there's 2 ways I can simplify this. One way is just to divide by whatever number I can think of. I could definitely divide both numbers by 2, so I could divide by 2. Divide by 2. Since we're dividing the top and bottom by the same number, we're really dividing by 1 and it doesn't change the fraction. If I do that, 16 divided by 2 is 8. 24 divided by 2 is 12. The problem with this method is it might take you some extra work. I think I can divide again. If I look at these numbers, I see that this time I can divide both these numbers, 8 and 12. I can divide them both by 4. Again, I'm dividing the same number on the top and the bottom, so I'm really just dividing by 1, a fancy one. If I divide 8 divided by 4, that's 2. 12 divided by 4, that's 3. This fraction really simplifies to 12/3. It's definitely one way to simplify a fraction, just through trial and error, just keep going until you can't do it any further. Another way to do it is to figure out what's the largest factor that goes into both 16 and into 24. So if I were to try this fraction again, I have 16/24. If I think about what number goes into both these numbers, the biggest factor I can think of is for 16, 2 times 8, that's 16, and for 24, 3 times 8, that's 24. I know that I can divide both the numerator and denominator by 8. So if I divide the numerator and denominator by 8 over 8, again I'm dividing by a fancy 1, and in one step I should be able to simplify this fraction. 16 divided by 8 is 2, 24 divided by 8 is 3, and I have my answer of 2/3. Either method should work, just giving you some different strategies to simplify a fraction. I'm going to show you one more example before I ask you to try. That example is 16/4. I'll rewrite it right here. If you're looking at this fraction, I'm hoping that you see immediately that 4 goes into 16 evenly. So I know that this is going to simplify to a whole number. But if I were to use the same steps as last time, I know that I can divide the numerator and denominator by 4. If I do that, 16 divided by 4 is 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. I have 4 over 1. I know that 4 over 1 is the same thing as just 4. So even though we started off with a fraction, it simplifies to a whole number. But hopefully you caught that immediately when you saw that 16/4 was going to go into 16 evenly. Okay, I'd like you to try now. Please stop the video here and try C and D, and press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried C, you've tried D, let's check our answers quickly. If I have 24/30, the biggest number that goes into both of these fractions, I believe, is 6. So in one step, you should be able to divide the numerator and denominator by 6 to get your answer. 24 divided by 6 is 4. 30 divided by 6 is 5. You should have had 4/5 as your answer. Give yourself a check if you had that. Next one, 15/5. Hopefully you saw pretty quickly that it goes in evenly. I'm going to write that over here because I'm running out of space. 15/5, you know that 5 is going to go into 15 3 times. But again, if you wanted to use that method, you could, and divide by 5, divide by 5. If you do that, 15 goes into 5 3 times, 5 goes into 5 one time. 3 over 1. Hopefully you wrote that that's the same thing as 1. Either answer is correct, but I think to be completely simplified, we would have just written this as 3. Okay, that's our first skill, which is simplifying fractions. The second skill that's part of this objective assessment is how you rewrite fractions. And so that's going 2 directions. That's first going from an, first going from a improper fraction like, 15 halves, to an improper fraction, such as 7 and 1/2. And then we're going to look at how you go the other way around, which is from an improper fraction, from a mixed number back to an improper fraction. So we're going to look at how you go both ways right now. Looking at this first example, A, I see I have the fraction 11/3, so I have an improper fraction. I'll rewrite it. I want to turn this into a mixed number. So the method I'm going to use to do that is I'm going to divide the numerator divided by the denominator. So I'm going to divide 11 divided by 3 and see how many times it goes into 11. If I do that, 3 goes into 11, 3 times 3 is 9. 11 minus 9 is 2. So for now I can just write I have 3 with a remainder of 2. This information is really all I need to be able to rewrite this fraction, because you should see that that means I have 3 wholes and 2 pieces left over. Since those pieces are thirds, the remainder of 2 really is 3 and 2/3. So just to kind of retrace my steps, the first thing I did here was divide the numerator divided by the denominator. Whatever my remainder was, that was the fraction I had left over. Since I was dividing by 3, my fraction was in thirds. Go ahead and stop the video here, and I'd like you to try to turn 14/5 into an improper fraction. Okay, you tried B, which was 14/5. If you did that, you either were able to do it in your head or you did the division here. 5 goes into 14 only 2 times, so you have 10, 4 left over, so that's 2 remainder 4. So as a fraction, this should have been 2 wholes, and 4 you were dividing by fifths. So you should have had 2 and 4/5. If you got that, give yourself a check in your paper. So that was one way, how you go from an improper fraction to a mixed number. Now we're going to revisit how you go the other way around. For the sake of space here, I'm going to fix this a little bit so that we can have a little more space here. And now we're ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to do that first example. See, it says 2.5. Because my computer, not really easy to write fractions, I use the and sign to really write this. 2 and 1/2. I want to turn this into an improper fraction. So the way that I'm going to do this is, the first thing I'm going to do is multiply the whole number times the denominator. 2 times 2 is 4. And then I'm going to add the numerator. 4 plus 1 is 5. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. So that's really 5. I keep the original denominator halves. So just to kind of retrace my steps here, if I multiply the whole number times the denominator, that was 4, and then I added the numerator, that was 5. And so that's my answer of 5/2. I'd like you to stop the video here. Try D on your paper, which has 4 and 2/5. Press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried D. If you look at 4 and 2/5, you rewrite it first as 4 and 2/5. You multiply 4 times 5, that's 20. Then you add the numerator, 20 plus 2. Your numerator should have been 22. Your denominator stays the same as fifths. Your correct answer should have been 22 fifths. Give yourself a check if you got that answer. Okay, now we've gone both directions from how you rewrite improper fractions as mixed numbers and vice versa. There's one last skill that's pretty complex because it uses other skills that you've already reviewed in slides 1 and 2. And that's how do you order fractions?